कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी यादों में बरसातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें। मन की गहरी झील में कूद जाती हैं कभी, सोच के दरिया के संग संग बहती जाती हैं कभी। चाहे शाम हो या हो रातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें।
Welcome to Kitaabnama, Books and Beyond. Today we have with us Niels Nordberg. He is a critic, historian of crime fiction, and a curator, if you will, of a particular genre that has become famous over the last few decades, which is Scandinavian crime fiction. Niels, I'm going to start right from where it begins. I mean, what is it about Scandinavia and crime fiction? Why is it such a compelling mix?
Yeah, well, I've been asking myself the same question. I suppose it has to do with the fact that the Scandinavian countries are very peaceful, very ordered, welfare societies where people are cared for, and crime is still rather small. But Scandinavian or Nordic crime fiction has been growing in volume over the past, say, 40 years. And it's obviously because our societies have changed quite a lot over that time. For one thing, Norway, my country, struck oil in about 1970, and I noticed that crime fiction, the number of crime fiction books went up. It quintupled between 1972 and 1975. And my explanation for that is that we went very quickly from a basically rural society to an urbanized society. It changed our society much more than we saw at the time. Right. So, and there we are still.
So in a sense, it's really a particular genre of, let's say, social realism, if one looks at it that way. I mean, crime fiction, the Nordic sort of noir that we talk about, I mean, that is essentially, it mirrors what's happening not necessarily mirrors, but it sort of deals with what's happening in the real social world, which is quite, it's not in that sense a kind of a fantastical sort of crime fiction. I mean, but within this genre, this sort of big genre, there are variations, aren't there? I mean,
oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, we talk about Nordic noir, but so many of the books written in the Nordic countries are not noir in the accepted sense. Some of them are, well, stories where everyday life is taken to, is moved into dangerous territory. I think crime fiction, one of the reasons why people like to read crime fiction is because it's about the things they fear, the things they are afraid of, but that doesn't necessarily happen. I mean, most of us go through life without ever coming in touch with crime. And crime fiction is about the things you read in the newspapers. So many people feel it's closer to reality than mainstream books, which are more introvert, more concerned about matters of the soul and so forth. So it's, yeah, it's as you said, it's sort of realistic in tone, but of course it's a kind of adventure. Yeah. It's a kind of, it's in a universe, they're set in a universe that is more dangerous, more filled with action and unexpected events than reality. Most people also in Scandinavia lead lives of quiet desperation, that's the right to put it.
I mean, in terms of, I mean, we have started to sort of identify with Scandinavian crime fiction as a particular genre, but could you just give us an idea about where it started? If there was I'm sure there's not a single starting point, but where it picked up and how it came to be.
Well, I could go back a very long time actually and say that the first world's first detective story was published in 1840, and it was written by a Norwegian who was like Edgar Allan Poe. He was a product of the Age of Enlightenment and also the Age of Romanticism.
Who is that?
His name was Maurits Christopher Hansen, and he was a poor writer who was the first writer of prose fiction in my country, actually. And for some reason, he sort of came upon this new idea of presenting a crime from the point where it is discovered, when it's still a mystery. A story about the investigation of a crime and not the committing of a crime, which was usual before that. We had lots of tales about criminals and master thieves and murderers and so on. But of course, in Scandinavia it all started with Sherlock Holmes stories, when detective fiction became very popular. But I think what concerns us now is, say about 1970, when Sjöwall and Wahlöö, the Swedish couple, broke into the crime world, and were the first Scandinavians to be translated into English. Actually, there was a Norwegian book also translated and published in America, and it was praised by Dashiell Hammett, which is interesting. But
this
there were no more.
In the 30s, 40s.
Yeah, that was in the 30s. But Sjöwall and Wahlöö came 25 years after the war, and they brought something new onto the stage, a realistic telling of cases that could have happened in reality. And it taught so many people that crime fiction could be worth reading, particularly young left-wing people who thought of crime fiction or detective fiction as kind of petit bourgeois, conservative, even reactionary. And through Sjöwall Wahlöö they also discovered Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, you know. So that's where it took off. And of course the way the societies developed with the rising rate of crime and a change of society from, you know, the societies became more opaque, more of a jungle where there were predators hidden.
So it's a sort of, I mean, it's a kind of sort of a crime fiction universe, but in a sort of diet form, real life. I mean, you bring an interesting point, which is essentially about you know, people moving in terms of their reading taste and their sort of taste for sort of engaging with the imagination, as it were. I think somewhere down the line, crime fiction has been taken as a serious genre. I don't mean it like. I remember reading about letters that Raymond Chandler actually has written to his publisher and friends, talking about, you know, how at the end of the day he was not being taken seriously, and I think that kind of mentality has gone, and a lot of that has to do with the kind of literature, really, that crime fiction has become. A great writing by itself. Could you sort of tell us a bit about, you know, in terms of how, let's say, the Nordic readers, for instance, take. I mean, there's an international audience where, you know, I think a lot of people sort of got the full blast of, let's say, Stig Larsson after it got translated. But there, we would be curious to know what do the readers from Scandinavia think of crime fiction that their writers write, and also the way in which the world has taken to it.
Well, there's a huge readership of crime in Scandinavia now, bigger than ever, and also the number of titles are going up at terrific rate, and it's probably going too far. I think last year there was about 250 crime novels published in Scandinavia.
Is there a pressure to for writers to sort of?
Yeah, well, maybe not. Well, so many writers take to crime fiction, and perhaps they think that they will become rich and famous doing it because there is an audience. But the fact is that, say, about 10% of the writers sell more than half the number of books, copies. So, yes, well, people in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, they all read crime fiction now to a degree which is unheard of, and there are complaints that crime fiction is crowding out serious quote unquote fiction, and there is too much of a good thing. As far as the spread of Nordic noir into the world, now what's happened now is that so many books have been translated into English,
right,
which wasn't so before. Germany has had a huge appetite for Scandinavian crime fiction, and France, Italy, other countries, but the English market has been very hard to get into. But now they are coming, and I suppose what American, English, Indian readers like about it is the fact that these books are, in a sense, they can identify with the people in it. I mean, it's not that different from what they know, but it's the contrast between light and darkness, the fact that we have this long, dark winter and the light summer, the contrast between mayhem and ordered welfare society, and maybe it's a little bit exotic with the names and everything.
Sure.
So, yeah, well, it's hard to say, but something catches on, it catches on.
But I remembered, I think it was in the early 90s when there were certain sort of, now we call it crime fiction, which was in the general literary section. I remember reading Miss Miller's Feeling for Snow.
Oh, that's a good example.
Now that was a book which, if I hadn't been told that it was a crime fiction, I would have read it as a, as a book with. So, I mean, when I ask you, is there a pressure for writers to write it? I mean, as a critic, what do you think? I mean, I'm sure there are cases which work and cases which are a bit too forced. Do you sort of sense that there might be, I mean, I don't know, has there been a point in which you as a critic have felt that, this particular book might have worked if it hadn't been pushed into the cubbyhole of crime fiction?
Yeah, well, there are several, but I think such as Miss Miller's Sense of Snow, which was given the award for the best crime novel of the year, and also the prestigious Nordic Prize for Literature in the same year. Of course, you could call it anything, I mean, a straight novel, but as long as this combination works, as long as you can write books to a certain literary level and still have the mystery or the thriller plot inside it, I think you are all right. And I think also that mainstream writers set out to learn from the thriller how to keep the reader in suspense, because that was their problem. So Miss Miller's Sense of Snow is a kind of a prime example of a novel that works both ways. And there was a Swedish novel by Kerstin Ekman, also winner of the Nordic Award, and she wrote a novel called Incidents Near a Lake, and it has a murder mystery in it. She started out as a mystery writer, actually. Her first books were thrillers and crime fiction. Some of the best writers of crime fiction in Scandinavia, like Håkan Nesser, who is one of my favorites, absolutely, and Karin Fossum from Norway. She also writes books which are sort of in this area between crime and fiction.
Grey zone.
Yeah, there's a grey zone there. Yeah, and that's interesting. These writers usually write better than pure crime writers, because the language tend too much to be sort of well, it works, but it isn't really exciting to read.
I mean, it stops working after the book is over sometimes. Whereas the great ones sort of continue after you've closed the book.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with any sort of Indian sort of crime fiction writer? Or as such?
No, unfortunately. Until I was invited to India, well, the only sort of Indian crime fiction I read was H.R.F. Keating's
Yes,
Ganesh Gota stories, which I love.
Yeah.
And I love Ganesh Gota. He's such a sort of kind of, you know, chaplain character and a clever policeman at the same time. But well, I did read a couple of Satyajit Ray's Faluda stories, and of course I discovered that there's a huge lot going on in Indian crime fiction. And
I mean, for India, I think, I mean, essentially it came in with, you know, the law coming in. I mean, when sort of when Britain under colonial rule, we had one sort of police system, and in a way it's interesting because the Indian police system, which started, and that was sort of immediately followed by sort of disparate crime writing. I mean, some of them were sort of based on real events. I think another thing I think that, you know, it's interesting is the correlation between the law and the way it's treated in fiction in general. Do you think Scandinavia's sort of fascination for crime fiction also has a kind of correlation with the way society over there look at the law? The reason I'm asking this is maybe India as a crime fiction writing place is not as sort of vibrant, simply because I don't think we have a very different, let's put it this way, different notion of the law. Do you think, you know, crime fiction and the law in the real world, there is a sort of a...
I think, well, one of the things you'll find when you read Scandinavian fiction is that it's very much concerned with justice. Right. And also the most of the main characters, the serious characters that you find, they are policemen. Right. And generally people have a high regard for the police in Scandinavia. They trust them, they look upon them as protectors, not as, you know. This sense of justice, this craving for justice is, I think, a very strong mark of our societies. But I also think, and it's interesting what's happening in India, because I think a flourishing of crime fiction is an encouraging sign. Well, it means two things. It means perhaps that people have more anxieties, are more stressed, society is sort of, you know, becoming more dangerous, but at the same time, crime fiction is an expression of democracy.
Absolutely.
It developed in the democracies. Crime fiction is actually, it's kind of subversive writing.
No, absolutely. I can't imagine, let's say, crime fiction from North Korea, for instance.
Or China, or Iran. Not for the time being.
Well, it's probably some kind of Samizdat literature, underground literature, perhaps, that we don't know about. But you're absolutely right. And I think, you know, it's also, I think, in India, what's happening is there is a recognition that that something, I mean, earlier on when a wrong happened in terms of law, it was kind of treated more fatalistically. So we have a sort of rich history of mythologies, escapist literature and cinema, but somehow I don't think we had this notion that, okay, I recognize this as a serious bad thing. I think that could lead to some kind of you know, whether it's sort of crime or horror or, you know, the genre literatures, as we call it. And so you're here for a while. What are you looking forward to? I mean, non-crime fiction's question, but do you have any plans in terms of figuring out, you know, what to do in India?
Yeah, well, this is my first time in India. I've been to Bangladesh years ago because my daughter comes from there. Well, I suppose what I want to bring with me is a new knowledge of Indian crime fiction, of course. But then, I mean, there's the country which I read about. Is, you know, it's kind of a dream world to me, and so far it's been a wonderful experience. Really, I mean, and I have such a great respect for Indian culture. It goes back thousands of years, and people in my country became sort of civilized in, say, 1500 years ago, perhaps, thereabouts, and they're still semi-civilized.
Well, we hope to have a kind of a renaissance about civilization ourselves, so let's wait and see what happens to that. But it's been a pleasure, Mr. Nordberg, and I hope we get to sort of talk about this more.
Yep.
And may the Nordic Noah flourish in the sun or without the sun, depending upon how it is. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
एक नज़म कश्मीरी नज़म से पहले दो शेर गज़ल के थर आंगन छम हाथ तात फूल न जह गुलाब थर आंगन छम हाथ तात फूल न जह गुलाब चश्मन अंदर में तोत छम सर ताज वज़िल खाब दुप हम ज़ मरन ब्रोंठ चे क्या आखिरी तमा दुप हम ज़ मरन ब्रोंठ चे क्या आखिरी तमा जानान यह कम ज़ में कुरचोन इंतखाब। तो वो कशर नज़म एक कश्मीरी नज़म है, इसका उन्वान है सवाल। सो क्वचि हंस बच हेत हरित आमच मालिन कुन सो क्वचि हंस बच हेत हरित आमच मालिन कुन लोच गंडित आसन वर विच पाम अनमच यार बलस पे बिहित लुत लुत बावान पन्न वेसन तिम आसस कन दरित बोजान रन्याम साड़ जट कलस पे रंग डजमस बंग्रि नरन रोट गमच लोसमत्यो अथो लुत लुत बान मांजान दजमचो चश्मो कतर कतर खून हारान अख कतर आबस सत मिल गथित अख सवाल बनान। तो अब आपकी नज़र दो नज़में उर्दू में है। तो पहली नज़म है सावन की पहली बारिश में तस्वीर जो हमने खींची थी सावन की पहली बारिश में तस्वीर जो हमने खींची थी वो आज भी मेरे कमरे में दीवार पे लटकी रहती है। वो सर पे ओढ़ी चुनरी तेरी मुझे आज भी भीगी दिखती है। वो दिन भी कितने प्यारे थे वो दिन भी कितने प्यारे थे जब साथ में हम तुम सारे थे। वो रातें दिलकश लगती थी वो रातें दिलकश लगती थी मैं सोता और तुम जगती थी। वो तेरी पहली मोहब्बत थी या मेरी पहली चाहत थी। तो एक और नज़म है मेरे मन मंदिर में तेरी ही एक मूरत मैंने रख ली है मेरे मन मंदिर में तेरी ही एक मूरत मैंने रख ली है जिसे रोज़ मैं पूजा करता हूँ और सांझ सवेरे प्यार भरा एक दीप जलाया करता हूँ। हर चीज़ तुम्हारे नाम वहाँ ये सोच के हमने रख ली है। तुम जैसी भी हो मेरे लिए भगवान सी सूरत रखती हो भगवान सी सूरत रखती हो।